Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to the Reclaiming Soul Work podcast, where we are reclaiming the sacred in soul work for healers, counselors, practitioners, and social workers, one episode at a time. We'd like to welcome you to episode 10, where spiritual practitioners will answer, how does trauma impact your ability to distinguish between intuition, fear, anxiety, and doubt? We are so excited because today we have some amazing colleagues, spiritual practitioners who are joining us for this important conversation on how to trust your intuition, explore the impacts of trauma, and tips on how to reconnect.
Hey, y'all. We are so excited. So excited. Welcome to episode 10. And like I was telling mi amiga over here, we're in the double digits now, y'all. Episode 10. I cannot even believe it. Can you believe it, Sequoia?
It's been a journey. It's
It's
been
been
a
a journey.
journey.
I'm really proud of us. That's all I'm going to say.
Mhm, mhm.
So for those who are new, welcome. For those who've been here with us, thank you. Thank you. Reclaiming Soul Work is a heart-centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, identity, and ancestral connections through the lens of tarot, divination, mysticism, mental health, and everything in between. My name is Biani. My pronouns are she, they, and I am really grateful to be here today. I will say that I'm really feeling this energy of Scorpio season. And I know that we're like in eclipse season too, because the new moon is coming, y'all, next, like tomorrow. And so I'm kind of feeling this kind of pull to do a lot of shadow work, which I'm really grateful for. Um, and I want to make space to acknowledge the land that I live, work, and play in, Lenni Lenape land, also called Philadelphia right now. And just sending a lot of gratitude to the folks, to the land, to the sort of indigenous folks who really call this land home. I'm just grateful. I'll also mention that my big three is a Virgo sun, Cancer rising, and Aries moon. And that is very alive for me right now. I was just telling Sequoia, I have a toddler who is an Aries sun. So it's just been really an interesting journey these last couple of days. And yeah, I'll say that. I'm really just excited to be here. What about you, mi amiga?
Yeah, thank you so much for that reflection and also reminding us about the new moon coming up and the eclipses and everything. Scorpio, really any water energy for me is
Mm.
very heavy. Like I can just feel that. So resonates the whole bunch. But for those just tuning in, my name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns, and I live and work in Anchorage, Alaska on Dena'ina land. I'm really grateful to be here with you all today. My big three are Aquarius, Sun, Aries, Moon, and Libra rising. So yeah, we're excited to get into some things.
We are getting into some things, y'all. We are getting into some things, and we are so excited. Like Sequoia said, this is going to be really. I think it's an important conversation. We think it's an important conversation, and we have some special guests who are going to really join us on this really important conversation. We're talking about intuition, and we know it's really important. So let's get into it. Welcome to this episode, episode 10, Spiritual Practitioners Answer. How does trauma impact your ability to distinguish between intuition, anxiety, fear, and doubt? And my friends, as the title suggests, today is a special episode because we have invited two special people to join us to talk about intuition. Now, we all know that intuition is important. We hear it all the time. We hear it in spiritual spaces. We hear it in healing spaces and wellness spaces. But what does it really mean, right, to connect to our intuition, right? The truth of it is that listening to it and recognizing your intuition can really vary. It can really vary based on your experiences, based on your history, based on like who you are, right? Your personality. And so we know that in the world, there's a lot of conversation about how to reconnect to your intuition. But we're going to kind of do a deep dive of like what could really get in the way of us connecting to our intuition. And additionally, if you've had traumatic experiences in your life, it can be challenging to notice the difference between intuition, anxiety, fear, and doubt. So we really hope that today's episode offers you clarity, guidance, and even some tips and takeaways as to how you can listen to your intuition and move through possible doubt, fear, anxiety, etc. And like always, friends, be prepared to take notes, or I invite you to, take moments of pause if you need to, but get ready for some deep dive. And I want to offer a disclaimer, as we always do. We want to invite you to make space for curiosity, for awe, for wonder, for mad question asking as we ride this journey and this episode topic together. Let's invite gentleness and patience with ourselves. Give ourselves grace, give yourself grace, because we are on this journey alongside of you, my friend. And we also want to acknowledge that, as practitioners, these are things that we are also navigating as healing practitioners, as wellness practitioners, as therapists, as spiritual social workers, spiritual counselors. And we really haven't had spaces for us. So we really want to make space for how you might want to engage us today. Okay. And so perhaps you might want to journal and reflect more about what you're hearing. You might want to talk to a trusted friend or somebody that really you can lean on to support you. These things can look like, whether it's like a therapist or your spiritual advisor. And if you're a practitioner who's really wanting to bring this conversation into your work with clients, we'd love to hear from you. So let us know in the comments whether you agree, disagree, or if you have questions, or if there's some things you feel like we haven't thought about. Let us know. We really want to be in dialogue with you. We're really open to it and we welcome it. So please do, chat with us online here, whether it's live or watching the recording. And yeah, I know that was a mouthful, so I'm going to kind of pause for a second. All righty. So what we're going to do next is introduce our wonderful spiritual practitioner / guest panelist. And again, y'all, this is going to be a conversation between the four of us. We have our questions already prepped, so you'll be able to follow along. And yeah, just, sit tight as we welcome our colleagues in. First, I would like to introduce Nadelynn Finn at Day Lotus Divination. Nadelynn is a mental health counselor, Reiki practitioner, psychic medium, and witch. She is passionate about diversifying the mental health field through the integration of spiritualism and the cohesion of Eastern and Western philosophy. In her therapeutic practice, she incorporates holistic alternatives such as Reiki, tarot, and spiritual self-exploration. Nadelynn also runs a divination business where she offers intuitive services such as tarot reading, bone casting, Reiki, and animal Reiki. And in her spare time, you can find her volunteering or catching up on her never-ending list of books. Welcome, Nadelynn. And next, we have Lauren Donelson. Lauren, I'm so sorry. Lauren Donelson at Astrotherapy, Astro_therapy_. Lauren is an astrologer and therapist licensed in Washington State. She integrates astrology with internal family systems work, and she helps clients heal from past experiences and reconnect with their intuitive wisdom. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry about, please tell me how to pronounce your last name right now so we get that.
You had it.
I did?
You had it, Donelson. Yeah,
Donelson,
you got
okay.
it.
Great. Okay.
All right, you all, let's get into some questions so folks can get to know y'all. And we heard about your practice, and in episode 2, spiritual social work is an embodied practice. Biani and I share a little bit more about how we got into this work, kind of like our origin story. And so definitely check back to that episode. But I also would love to hear and wanted to ask you both, what inspired you to do this work? And Nadelynn, if you want to take this one first, and then Lauren, and then we'll just kind of, chit chat.
Yeah, absolutely. During childhood, I would experience a lot of spiritual things that was unexplained, and no one could provide support for me. And it was very much a denying and invalidating part of my life. And just about 2 years ago, I had a really rude spiritual awakening, and I found Reiki. And after my first session, I just knew I had to learn more about it, not only just for myself and my healing journey, but for something I wanted to provide for other clients. And so after I got certified, I practiced on a lot of people, and I just the results that I've seen, their personal experiences with Reiki and how it really helped with their trauma is just so profound. And I always say this, that it is so difficult to describe in words. And sometimes it's difficult to describe with just logic. So that's a little about me.
Thank you so much for that. I think the opportunity where an awakening happens, and you're open to kind of that journey and what happens next. I think it resonates. I think, definitely aligns with, how a lot of folks, including our clients, kind of come to these spaces to kind of asking these types of questions. And so, Lauren, would love to hear how you got into this work.
Yeah, first I just wanted to share that I resonate with so much of what you said, Nadelynn, about being a really young person, in childhood, having experiences that no one could explain and not really having support. Fortunately, my family wasn't like negative towards them, but just kind of didn't know what to do with it. So I really resonate with that. And for me, I've always been drawn to astrology, like even back in middle school, probably even younger. It's always sort of been in the background for me, something I've always been aware of. And I came to the mental health field after going through my own eating disorder recovery. And that reconnection to my body was a spiritual experience. And when I got to grad school, thinking this is what I'm going to do with my life, I think I assumed everyone was going to be also a spiritual practitioner. And I am sure, as you've all experienced, that is not the case. And I realized that this really is something unique to me. And of course, I found other colleagues all over the country and all over the world now. But as a brand new clinician, it was very lonely. And in grad school, I got my first professional astrology reading, and he was really able to outline, like, spiritual work is your work. And it felt very validating in a way that, no one had ever told me explicitly, like, this is what you're here to do. And I remember thinking in that moment, I wish my therapist could understand this. And that's kind of like I didn't know at the time, of course, but looking back, that was kind of like the moment that this was born, this, integrating mental health and spirituality together. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. With the both of you all, again, how you kind of came to this work resonates, and, I think really gets into kind of the next question, if you will. My experience in school was similar, and also, a topic that for a long time I didn't talk about, just related to being identified as a Black queer person, but then also having this identity appreciation and also connection to spirituality and the ways that shows up in the type of work that I do, and so I feel like those are some of the conversations that I would love to have, more of, specifically around like mental health and spirituality, and just wondering, how you feel about that. Are there any topics, that you would love to have more discussion on? And Biani, please don't hesitate, like jump in whenever you are ready.
I just want to say something that resonated with what you both were saying, but what's staying with me, because I really love words and I get caught up sometimes in words, but what Lauren said really resonated. Like, I wish my therapist could see this part of me. I know that wasn't exactly what you said, but that feeling I had, like my heart just opened up a little bit. And I think, for a lot of us being intuitives, being spiritualists who are also therapists, like I know that feeling. I remember that feeling in grad school and post grad, being in spaces where I was always picking up on the like spirit and the sacredness and feeling really alone, especially as like a queer Black femme, and I was a young parent. It was just like, it really resonates, this idea that a lot of what we're doing is helping the folks we hold space for feel seen and feel really witnessed for all their parts, So yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of reflect back on.
Would you say that even some of your reflection, Biani, is a part of some of the conversations that you like to hear more about? So like
Right.
even this
I didn't
piece
answer the
about,
question.
it's okay. It's all right. It's fine. Even this piece about, being a spiritual practitioner and having this desire, to be more open with your clients about that side of yourself, or for you to create a space where they feel, comfortable to be able to talk to you about that. I know that in itself, when you're in school or even with certain like supervisors, like the supervision and consulting and things like that, that is absolutely not a part of the
Our
building
training.
rapport, intake questions, like anything like that, to kind of even alert your clients or a potential client that you're down with it. It's fine. Like bring all your parts to the
Right.
session.
I mean, it's interesting. I always felt like I feel like spiritually, I think some people would be like, oh, you're very much like IFS, like naturally, and like internal family systems. I didn't even know about IFS until a client told me about it. And I remember because I was sort of like, hey, like this work is really about inviting all your parts. Like I want to see the part of you that's angry. I want to meet the part of you that you had to hide to survive, right? And I remember my client being like, do you train in IFS? And I was kind of like, what is IFS? But I remember, I think a lot of it was like, look, I'm a witch. This is who I am. I'm a queer bruja. And I want you to know that. And I want to make space for you too, right? And not necessarily about religion, but making space for the parts of you that are already intuitive, right? And learning about your lineage, and not necessarily like biological, but like who are your queer ancestors? Who are the people that have guided you on this journey, right? And um, I used to be an intake specialist at this group practice, and a lot of the training that I offered clinicians was sort of like, y'all need to ask questions about spirituality. Don't confuse that with religion, please don't. But also acknowledge like what is the trauma that they've experienced around religion. Let's normalize that, especially working with queer folks and BIPOC folks and people who've survived trauma, like a variety, like unfortunately, like many forms of trauma. But I would show up to my office, had crystals. I had like astrology books laid out, a lot of Audre Lorde. Like it was really clear who you were going to be in a relationship with. And I think that was my way to resist and I was so upset about my training because a lot of my training was like, you can't wear head wraps. You can't tell them like who you are. And it was so weird. I'm like, well, they hear me, right? They see me, the way I'm dressed, my accent, the way I talk. And yet you're telling me I'm not supposed to show myself. And I'm asking them to show themselves. It seems really like hypocritical, actually. So I really hope we can encourage more space for talking about spirituality, going deeper than like religious institutions, which are important, and asking people about their lineage. Like how did you learn about the divine? What's your relationship to what do you think about God or goddess? Like, I'm curious. I want to know those parts of you too. So many of our clients will be like, oh yeah, I was scared to say something until you asked. Let's acknowledge our power dynamics, right? Like, if we don't ask, they're not going to tell us. And that's on us. That's not on them. So I guess that's what I'll say for now.
Yeah, Biani, I totally get what you're saying. Just about the acknowledgement of more spiritual practices and aspects of someone's life. And that's something I did also kind of write down. It's just more acknowledgement of the diverse spirituality and religions that are present in this world, because really right now, from my understanding, there's only a select few religions that are acknowledged in mental health, and that's like, yeah, that's what we're going to practice, and that's only optional. And, there's not much discussion of cultures that are deeply rooted in shamanic practices, divination. There's just so much that is missing. That's just like a missing puzzle piece, it feels like.
Totally. I just wanted to add to that, like, when other therapists have asked me, like, is it okay to integrate astrology? And I always say to them, like, would you ever think like Christian counseling wasn't okay? Like, would you ever even have that thought? And yet tarot cards and therapy is like, whoa, like, I don't know if we're allowed to do that. And it's just so amazing to think how much is left out and how little of ourselves we're taught initially, like, to bring in with clients. It's actually kind of wild and upsetting.
I love this connection that y'all made, especially around like what what is communicated as normal through like mainstream kind of typical topics within religion, and identifying what those are and things like that. And for folks that might be listening to us on Spotify or who might have this as a podcast and kind of not looking at the screen, please know that throughout the entire kind of conversation, everybody's head is nodding and we're all like very engaged and it feels like it's resonating. So Biani, were you going to jump in?
I love that you're like, let's acknowledge the body right now, right? That like, it's also, it's a part of our intuitive work, right? Like really being in our bodies. And so I love that invitation. That's all. And I'm nodding and kind of moving and wanting to dance.
So these are just really great topics, and I hope that there is more space created, for conversations and support around um, a lot of the kind of topics that we've identified here. And so I just wanted to get into a little bit more of the topic that we're here to chat more on today. And Biani, you mentioned that intuitive piece. And so I offer for us to kind of have a conversation around how do we define intuition. Um, and for me, it's very simple, just those kind of inside nudges or, even thoughts that kind of have you reflect more on a question, an interaction, a decision that needs to be made. And so, yeah, like that's kind of how I see intuition. What about y'all?
I first want to name that it's hard to put into words. I don't think I have the perfect words for it. But when I was reflecting on this question, what I came up with is that for me, it's a feeling of openness and clarity. And with that, I feel like underpinning it is like a sense of compassion towards yourself. And a metaphor that I'll sometimes share with clients is like when you're looking in a mirror, like if the mirror is dirty, it's still a mirror, like you can still see. And therapy, astrology, tons of other spiritual practices kind of help us to like clean our mirror and see better or sense better, depending on how you interact with your intuition. And if you clean your mirror every day, it's going to be pretty clean and easy to see. But if if your mirror gets dirty and you don't clean it for months and months, it's like there's cobwebs and dust, and it kind of takes a while to come back to that. But yeah, I think it's just for me like this sense of clarity and again like the underpinning of compassion towards myself.
Lauren, I just loved what you said about that, especially with the mirror analogy, because I think it talks about psychic gifts and how we can use that in our intuition. And when I talk about intuition with my clients, I allow them to define intuition for themselves. And if they do have trouble, I'll provide some guidance and be like, it's like this inner knowing, but it's dependent upon how you naturally receive information in these messages. And we may talk about the 5 clairs as well.
I really love that. I mean, I think what feels powerful about intuition is that it kind of can't be named, right? Like it kind of is a felt experience. And we're trying our best to name it, which is really powerful. Because I'm a tarot nerd and a practitioner, I often lean on the high priestess to help me find intuition. And lately I've been thinking about, and maybe because I'm a Zennial, like an older millennial, but I'm thinking about radio frequency. And I find that a lot of my practice of intuition and supporting clients is to be like, hey, like we have a lot of white noise. Like our work is to sort of, like work with the frequency and get to like our true voice, like that self energy. Like how do we get to hearing ourselves? And we do that whether it's with breath work, grounding, leaning into curiosity, learning how to practice compassion, because I know that is a practice. Then I was playing around with intuition, like the word, and the word inside of intuition is intuit. And I was like, oh yeah, in tune with it, right? Like into it, in tune with it. And I often think about intuition as that way, like the practice of being in tune, right? With the rhythm beneath the surface. Like there's so much noise in the system that we're in. There's so much, we have so much of what we've been like socialized and what we learned from other people. We have other people's voices inside of us. We have other people's beliefs sometimes that we've integrated as ours. And at the same time, it's like sometimes it can really cloud our voice. And so I'm often like supporting clients. I like what you said, Nadelynn, around, hey, like you tell me first, like how you would define it. I think that's a wonderful intervention to sort of, because it's true, a lot of our clients will be like, well, tell me, what do you think? And I love that invitation to be like, well, tell me first, like, how would you define it, right? Because it often suggests their intuitive like gift or practice that they might not be aware of. And so, yeah, I'm always like, hey, like this is us, like kind of like with the radio, how can we kind of change the frequency? Like there's a lot of white noise, like can we get beneath that? And I don't think intuition is really subconscious. I think it's right beneath the conscious material. And I think in a lot of spiritual spaces, we really confuse intuition with like unconscious. So it's really fast. I'm grateful to be here because I think I want to also like demystify a lot of the way that we make intuition seem so hard. And it's not. It's really not. It's accessible. It can be simple. It can be challenging, but it's not like we all have the potential for intuitive gifts, for psychic gifts, it's accessible to all of us. So I love that mirror example too, Lauren.
Thank you all so much for that reflection. And I, especially the mirror image even of itself, of the cobwebs that you mentioned, Lauren, it definitely had me thinking about our next question, which is, what are your thoughts on how trauma impacts, our ability to distinguish between intuition, fear, anxiety, and doubt, right? And so the trauma then would be the cobwebs, the smudges, the water droplets from when you brush your teeth, like it's all of that, the hairspray, little kiddos' fingertips on the edges, so that to me would be the trauma. Those things that we have to like get our tools out, right, to make sure that we're addressing it. And so, yeah, I think for myself, it is just that, right? It's getting those tools out to be able to look at and address, whatever the cobwebs are, whatever the smudges are, and even just based on the differences and what kinds of obstructions there are to our mirrors, to ourselves, you have to address those things from different ways, right? Like Windex isn't necessarily going to help with, I don't know, a grease stain or something, like you might have something that helps smudges out a little better. So you got to switch up the rag that you have or the solution that you use, right? And so that might be astrology for you. That might be Reiki. It might be a tarot card reading. It might be narrative journaling, right? To kind of get at all of these places that really have impacted us and become a part of what our foundation is. That I don't know, that was I can keep going about that, so y'all please jump in, let me know what are your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll just jump in first. I truly believe that people who are highly, have a highly traumatic background have very strong intuition, and they're so good at what's called neuroception, picking up energies and feedback from outside of themselves, which often looks like hypervigilance, but they don't realize it. They don't realize that they're so powerful in that way. And again, it's just the doubt, the fear, and the environment that they're in that doesn't allow them to shine on their intuitive gifts, to build that and grow that. And they may struggle with interoception, being able to decipher, because they're receiving this intuitive information, but it's more like, okay, what do I do with it? Do I listen to it? Do I not? Do I ask somebody else? And so there's that inner turmoil that they need to work on.
Nadelynn, can you just define the terms you just used?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
For those who might. Oh, no.
Yeah. So it's neuroception is basically being able to perceive what is going on in the outside world. Everybody does it. And then interoception is being able to perceive what's going inside of you, inside of your body. And these are not terms that I coined at all. I'm currently taking a trauma-informed yoga class, and that's why I'm learning a lot about this. This is not something that they teach in school, unfortunately. They just generalize trauma, but there's so many types of trauma. Secondary, the popular ones are, intergenerational sexual trauma, acute, but there's even, systemic, institutionalized trauma. There's just so much that I just wish that we had more training on.
Yeah, I just wanted to share and add on to that like one of the ways I think about it is similar to what you were saying, Sequoia, with like, when the mirror is dirty, like that can be trauma. And some people's mirrors are really dirty, not to their own fault, right? And some, it's not so hard to clean it off and to see clearly. But when a part of us holds trauma and that part gets activated, if it hasn't been reprocessed or healed in some way, I think what we label as fear, anxiety, or doubt, comes up and gets activated. And from my experience and, working with clients, it's like, it almost like comes out in front of you and like blocks your view. So it's like, there's you and then your fear or anxiety standing in front of you. And you're almost like seeing through the eyes of fear or seeing through the eyes of self-doubt. And that can be really overwhelming, or, your intuition is not available if you're overwhelmed by fear. And like we've all named, there's so many ways to reorient that fear and get it to step back. And one of my favorite ways is to cultivate a relationship with it and sort of like get to know it the way I would a friend. Like, tell me more about what you're feeling. What are you so afraid of? And that relationship for me has again allowed the fear a sense of safety enough so that it can step back and my intuition can come forward. Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
I love that. I'm really, I love that we're using the metaphor of the mirror again, because I think part of what Sequoia and I have always been talking about too, like earlier on in season 1, was around spiritual bypassing. I think there's a lot of bypassing around trauma. And that's why we felt like this question was really important, because the truth of it is that trauma and intuition are going to be connected in a way, right? Like we can't, like the mirror is going to get dirty. It's going to keep getting, like it's going to always be there because of the system we live in, right? Now, the impact that it has on us isn't going to be the same every time, for sure. But I think there's a tendency of, when we're talking about intuition and spiritual spaces, to bypass trauma, to act like anxiety is bad, to act like fear is bad. Like the work is to be like toxically positive and, oh, something's wrong with you if you're not accessing your intuition every day. I mean, that's not real, right? Because we're living in this system. Our work isn't really like building compassion towards ourselves and being in practice of, oh, I'm feeling disconnected right now, or I'm feeling connected right now. Like it's practice. It's not necessarily about, like we have to work with it. And I love the idea of befriending anxiety, befriending fear. And I think even acknowledging trauma and that maybe I have an overdeveloped neuroception, using the language that Nadelynn offered as a survivor. I'm really hypervigilant, and sometimes to my own detriment, because I have a hard time like really tuning in. That happens to me even as a practitioner, even as a therapist. And what works for me, because when it comes to energy work, interoception is really, I'm starting, like that's a gift I have. And so I have to do breath work. I have to meditate. I have to do guided visualizations. I have to practice being compassionate and being in community with people I love that are like, hey, like, can you be kind to yourself, right? Because that practice helps me clear the fog in the mirror. And knowing that when I get up the next day, the mirror might be foggy again. Like it's not going to be totally done away with, because we live in this system that constantly traumatizes us, especially as a queer Black femme, first generation or child of immigrant parents, a parent themselves. Like there's always gonna be a little bit of a stain. My kids mess up the mirror every day, and I gotta clean it every day. And I appreciate them doing that, because they're also teaching me to embrace things, right? Like there's a lot of invitation there. And so I appreciate that you all are offering this idea that like trauma is there, you know, and we might have to work with it or acknowledge it and befriend ourselves to be like, wow, I really worked really hard to protect myself in this moment. And it's also hard to really see clearly right now, but I'm doing my best, you know, I'm really doing my best. And so, yeah, I think we're speaking to that also, that energy of like that toxic positivity, that like really inherent dismissal of, oh, you're not doing it right. What are you talking about? That's not how intuitive work works, you know, or even being a channel, you know, the idea of highly sensitive folks being the ones who are also highly traumatized, that connection is real. So how dare we offer this to people, this idea that something's wrong with them if they're, you know, it's a part of the work. Like you're going to have to do trauma work, and you're going to have to, like, that work is important. I know I'm kind of rambling. I probably didn't answer the question specifically, but I wanted to give some context as to why this question is really important. And for those who are tuning in, like, we really got to really chip away this whole bypassing thing, because you can be really intuitive and still navigate trauma. You can be really intuitive and still have to work through what happens when anxiety shows up, what happens when you're triggered and activated, what happens when you're angry, right? Like what happens to your intuitive channel. It's there too, right? Like we have to work with it. So
I just could not agree more with what you're saying. And the idea that it is there and it's there to be navigated. And yeah, I just lost what I was about to say, but I just really was resonating with so much of what you were saying. Oh, I remembered. Yeah, like I think, you know, obviously like the toxic positivity piece, like not we all, but the four of us, you know, we're aware of how harmful that can be too. And one thing I've been reflecting on a lot is even something like a mindfulness practice where you just kind of like notice and then you don't engage with it. I feel like, and this is not to knock or dismiss anyone's mindfulness practice, because I know it can be really helpful. But I think even something as, widespread as mindfulness doesn't inherently allow the engagement with, okay, so you're having anxious thoughts, you just let them run rampant and ignore them. Like that doesn't, like there's not like that connection with them. And like Nadelynn was saying, like I actually think, fortunately or unfortunately, people that have experienced trauma and have the capacity to engage in it with some way, that can actually make you more intuitive, because it allows for a sense of safety within to emerge and your intuition to come forward.
I appreciate this conversation so much. I think that a few things, but um, I think some of what we're getting at, especially related to the disconnections that we're talking about, even in the mindfulness piece, but then also just the spiritual bypassing piece, is how we as a society, a culture, a generation, like whatever the group is, how we talk about certain things. So like even having a spiritual journey, right? Like even the way that we talk about that is bypassing, or there's this piece that isn't integrated, because it gives this kind of context to, you're going towards a destination, like you're not, like it's you, like you're the destination, you're the journey, you know um you're the being that's alive. And pieces like therapy, tarot, reiki, astrology sessions, so on and so forth, these are the things because trauma impacts our ability to remember. And so these practices are the things that kind of gather our thoughts together and ground us and center us. I have a client, who has relatively, has anxiety. And one of the things that we do in session a lot is, I offer to remind her that, her anxiety may always be there, but it's more about, what are the skills and the practices that you're putting into place so that you remember, oh, this is my anxiety. Oh, this is my anxiety. And what's triggering that is, I'm in a meeting where I identify as a Black bodied individual, and I'm in an industry where everyone else at the meeting is white, and so that's why I'm anxious right now. Not that I'm going through imposter syndrome and I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, no, it's because of these white people in this room with you and you're the only Black person. And so that is the work. That is the journey. That is the healing. And I, again, like, those are the kind of byproducts of our experiences, like fear, anxiety, and doubt, and things like that. Like trauma seeks to make us forget, like, how to address those things. So that's what I want to offer there.
I want to add too, I was looking at my notes, but I appreciate that, because it's like about the deep listening, right? Like the deep listening. I think part of trauma healing, or like that work, is to help us really listen to ourselves. And like Sequoia said, reconnection, right? Because there are parts that we might have forgotten, or we might have had to, parts of ourselves that we had to kind of put to the side to survive whatever traumatic experiences we had or have had or are having. And I think intuition offers this space of like reconnection. And I think of intuition a lot of times as deep listening. And maybe that speaks to like my own kind of clear gifts, but often with clients, helping them to slow down just to listen again, because it's so loud out here. A lot of like, I love that example you used, Sequoia, like helping the client notice the field, right? Notice what's around them and being able to be like, oh, it's not me. Like, it's not me, actually. Like, this anxiety is offering me data and I'm the shit. Like, I'm badass. Like, they're the problem, right? Like, that work, that's intuitive work. That's helping them like learn to listen and reconnect to those parts that they couldn't when they were experiencing trauma. And so, yeah, I love that too. Like thinking about intuition as a deep listening. That's what resonated for me. What about y'all? Any other thoughts or?
I do, but I feel like it's going to tie into like one of the questions that we're going to go over anyway. So I can just, go ahead. Okay. So this is about how can we reconnect? And when you mentioned about this deep listening and listening to ourselves, I just really thought about intuition is for people who have a highly traumatic background. It's really about trusting themselves again, trusting their judgment, and how difficult that can really be when they're in an environment that is not supportive to that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's really an unfortunate piece for many people.
Yeah, I really appreciate that reminder, Nadelynn, like the challenge of trust. And I think often with clients, I'm often like, well, can we listen before we get to trust? Like, can we offer a space to be really kind to yourself? Can we listen to what's in you and around you? And I think the listening is important. And I agree with you, like holding the grief that trust is challenging right now. And you know, I know in the world, there's a lot of like, here's intuition, and this is what anxiety is, right? Like, there's a lot of these binary kind of, this is anxiety, this is intuition. I was thinking of this post that I shared with Sequoia a few weeks ago. It was actually really informative. It's not knocking her. It's more of like, wow, but the reality is that we have to, like Lauren said, be friends with anxiety, right? And also we might have to friend that part of us that doesn't trust just yet. Like making space for that too, to like, oh, I don't trust that part of me right now, but I'm listening too. Like I'm actually listening that I don't trust that part. Like I'm hearing it. I hear it. What would feel helpful and supportive right now? What would help me? What kind of support do I need around me or within me to help me acknowledge that I don't necessarily trust it just yet? And I think that piece around the mirror again, like that message of the mirror, like I still show up and I'm standing in front of that mirror to face myself. And yeah, yesterday it was foggy, today is dusty. Or what can I do? I see the dust, right? Like I might not be able to, I don't have the resources today to clear it out. Like it's Windex isn't going to work, or these other tools that I have won't work, but at least I'm acknowledging like things are really foggy today. That is to me, one of the invitations of intuition that's really powerful. And even the acknowledgement of that trauma does have an impact on our intuition, but it's still possible for us to build that practice. It's still possible.
Yeah, I just agree that listening is so foundational to connection with intuition. And I think what sort of fascinates me is that it's parallel to any other relationship, right? Like I think imagine like or remember like a time where you really felt heard and seen. And I think that's what we can do inside with the parts of us that are anxious and the parts of us that don't trust our intuition, like really hearing from them and like you were saying, like showing up for them, hearing their concerns and just kind of acknowledging like, yeah, it's foggy today. I've got like a huge smear on my mirror today and like that just is what it is. And I think that kind of practice and cultivating those types of relationship with all the different parts of you, like that is for me it's such a great tool for like continued connection, and it looks different all the time.
You know, I remember, so I want to bring the tarot piece. So in the tarot, the high priestess is the number 2. If you think of the journey linear, it's not linear. But one thing I realize is that the high priestess really activates folks because the energy of the high priestess is passive. Like in a world that's all about doing, right? The high priestess invites us to be. And when you've survived, you know, horrendous traumatic experiences, I would say a lot of my survival mechanisms were like, if we look at polyvagal, were sympathetic activation. It was a lot of like fight, flight, got to make it happen, got to get it done, right? And I noticed a lot of my healing work when I started this journey was around learning how to slow down, learning how to be with the uncomfortable, you know, learning how to be with my triggers, learn what my triggers were, like recognizing them. That was the hardest part for my 20-something-year-old self, to really sit with like what's happening in my body. And I think in some ways intuition is so important and so radical at the same time, to be able to kind of, you know, like Sequoia's client, like be in the room and be able to be like, oh wait, hold on, this anxiety is a sign. Like this isn't me. This is not safe terrain, right? Like being able to acknowledge and really be with ourselves in those moments. Like, yeah, there's something really important. And also it's like counter to the culture. It's anti-capitalist to be intuitive in a lot of ways, because I mean, it goes with the rhythm of nature, the rhythm of the moon, right? There's a lot of the high priestess. They're really comfortable with mystery and the unknown. They're really comfortable with not knowing. There's not an answer to everything, right? You can't put it into words, right? Like there's some things that can't be put into words, right? It's that veil, right? We're in actually the energy of Scorpio season, like the veil is thin right now. There's a lot of us being with the unknown, and intuition is such a helpful like compass, is a helpful guide for us. And I would offer too, like, I think there is a gift for survivors of folks who experience traumatic experiences. Like having that skill of neuroception is powerful. Now, if we rely on it heavily, it really can impact us. We know that as practitioners, like physiologically and things of that nature. But that's such a powerful gift that can get us ready for like interoception and proprioception, like being in our bodies and, you know, noticing, you know. But yeah, like I would say acknowledging that trauma's there is important to connecting to our intuition.
I really appreciate, you know, this, the connections between not only identifying, you know, the different types of trauma, that there are so many different types, how those kind of connect to this piece about the mirror, the different practices and processes that we utilize to, you know, help clean our mirror or address the things that are there, right? Continuing to show up for ourselves. I want to acknowledge, you know, that we've talked a lot about connecting to what's happening to our bodies. What are we feeling in conjunction with, you know, needing to identify for ourselves where's this coming from? Does it resonate more with anxiety? Does it resonate more with doubt? You know, and then as I mentioned, like what's triggering that? I love that Nadelynn kind of moved us into this conversation about reconnecting to our intuition, and you know, what are some tips around that? And what I heard you all say was things like trusting yourself, listening, also befriending the parts of ourselves, you know, that kind of resonate with this topic. Does anybody else want to offer any other kind of tips or even reflections about this reconnection to intuition?
Lauren, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just reiterate my favorite tip that I have named already is to develop a relationship with the parts of you that are doubtful or fearful or anxious, and the parts of you that don't believe you could be intuitive or feel like intuition is scary. And the one thing that I've noticed from doing this myself and helping clients with this is that these parts are always protective. that's like the underlying current, is that they are trying to protect us from something. Even if we don't like the impact, the intention is always, you know, to be helpful, to be protective. And I think that's a way that we can distinguish between what is intuition and what is something else, is that there isn't really as much of an inquiry with intuition, I've experienced. It's more of just a knowing. There is no agenda. There's no protection there. Yeah, so that's what I think.
I love that you mentioned that intuition, there's no agenda behind it. And it really does, maybe it's something that's safe, and is never something that can harm the individual. And if I could offer some tips myself, I would say one of the top things to do would be grounding yourself first. Creating that safe enough space within yourself or within your environment to be able to tune into your intuition. And then on top of that, it's going to tie into energy work, but really practicing what it feels like to feel doubt, anxiety, fear. You know, that's something I practice with my clients in energy work, is just closing your eyes and just remembering a time where you felt that fear, that doubt, and noticing where does that energy sit in your body? What does it feel like? And how much it differentiates between the four. And then another tip I would probably have, and this is probably a little more difficult, is cutting people out of your life that are not supportive of your gifts, that aren't supportive of your, you know, your purpose, what you truly believe that you're capable of. And if you can't cut them out, how can you limit yourself from being exposed to them? How can you limit your time with them? Because I understand that it may not be possible to truly cut out some people in your life that are not healthy for you.
I love all these tips. And I think my tip is a little similar. One of the tips that I try, and I'm also a Reiki practitioner, sacred energy, is if I get activated in the moment that I'm activated and I have a moment to myself, I take 3 deep natural breaths and I call upon that self that's activated, and I ask like how old they are, and then I talk to them. You know, I'll say, what do you need right now? How can I support you? Hey, it's me. I'll say like who I am, this present age. And like, I really appreciate all you've done for us. Look at me, like, look who I am now. And sometimes and part of the visualization is that I'm imagining a field, and I just imagine I'm in a field, but depending on the visualization, there are symbolisms there for me, which is probably why I really like tarot, because sometimes I'll see the symbolism in tarot. And I'm just sort of like, hey, I'm here with you. And, you know, sometimes it's really like, sometimes I'm weeping with them, like crying. Sometimes we're like, let's go for a walk, or we need to be in nature, and I'll drive to the nearest state park. You know, sometimes I have to stop everything. And sometimes I only have 5 minutes, right? And it's like an acknowledgement. But that's one of the ways that I'm able to sort of reconnect. I also think tarot or divination practices are wonderful ways to connect to intuition. Pulling cards and asking open-ended questions like, what am I being invited to pay attention to? I learned that from my teacher, Lindsay Mack. Like, what's the invitation right now? And stay with that. And then I hear like my body, like, oh, I feel something with this card. I'm noticing it in my body, and I try to reconnect to that. And I'm starting to do like automatic journaling or intuitive journaling with it. So those are the 2 ways that I would offer, 2 tips if it's possible.
Oh, these are some amazing tips, you all, you know, and for folks that are listening in, when we were talking previously about, you know, befriending the parts of yourself, how listening, trusting, all of these tips that everyone has shared, these are the concrete ways to listen, to build trust, also to befriend those parts of yourselves, asking these types of questions, taking the time out, to do that, creating the space to do that. All of that is in alignment with, you know, those things that we've mentioned. I feel like this has been amazing. I would love to just kind of offer, does anybody have like a final thought about anything? Just one more thing that you wanted to say, or something that, we previously said that resonates, that you just want to drive that point home? Anything like that? Okay, cool. Well, I would love to know, do you all have any offerings, events coming up? Or well, not or, and let folks know like where to follow you on social media. Give us all the details.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I love this conversation. I feel like I could pick out 100 things to take home. So I'm just gonna take in the vibe and the energy, this pre-eclipse moment of I'm feeling pretty calm and I just want to take it in. So thank you all so much. And yeah, you can find me on Instagram at astro underscore therapy underscore. And my offerings right now are just astrology readings. I just opened my books through to the end of the year, and my client practice where I combine IFS and astrology.
I kind of want to be your client, Lauren. Are you taking any clients?
Yes, wonderful. I am. Welcome.
Hopefully there's no, boundary issues. I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, that's so wonderful. I really want to thank you guys so much for this experience and having me on. This is such a wonderful opportunity, even for me to learn and just get these kinds of insights from other experienced spiritual practitioners and therapists and healers. The offerings that I am offering, one in particular is I'm a veteran, and in November, in honor of Veterans Day, I'm going to be offering a 25% discount on distant Reiki sessions for veterans, active duty military, reservists, you name it. And so that's going to be $52 for an hour session, which is really good. Normally they're about 80 to 100, ranging all the way to 150. So I just want to make it accessible for my brothers and sisters who've just gone through so much, the sacrifices they had to make. I mean, I'm just so appreciative of what they do. And so I just really want to give back to them during that time. So that's just an offering. And another thing I have as well is I'm working on creating this, and it's an Instagram live called Spirit Talk. And I would love to have spiritual practitioners, healers, you guys on there just to discuss your personal experiences with, divination, magic, psychic stuff, astrology. I'd love to have pagans on there as well, just everybody, just to have a diverse community for people to listen in and not feel like they're so alone in their own journey with this. So something that I wish I had growing up. And so I really want to provide that for, younger folk, even just older generation as well. And so people can find me on Instagram, Day Lotus Divination, TikTok as well, Day Lotus Divination, and my website, daylotusdivination.com. So thank you guys again so much.
Biani, is there anything that you wanted to just say related to this before we kind of move into main takeaways?
I'm really excited and also sad this is ending. So I wanted to say that. Thank you, Lauren and Nadelynn. I'm grateful, just grateful. As we come to a close.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here. It has been just an amazing 30, 45 minutes together. my sense of time is off right now. So that's why I'm trying to be mindful. Like we gotta, we just gotta have them on again. That's just what that means. Because there were just so many amazing takeaways.
I think I agree, Sequoia. We'll see what folks, what y'all think about it. Like Lauren said, I'm kind of feeling the pre-eclipse vibes too. But yeah, we would love to have y'all back on. This feels like a conversation, like to be continued in a way, right? Like it's sort of that vibe of here's where you start. Here's some ways you can reconnect. Like this practice of intuition work is a daily practice, and that's what I want to chip away at too. And we're hearing like from folks who are spiritual, like you did it and that's it. No, this is a daily practice of reconnecting and tuning in. So yeah. We're at main takeaways. That's my takeaway. This is a daily practice.
I appreciate that. And I think for me, a main takeaway is I appreciate that invitation, Lauren, about, just taking things in. I feel like there were so many good gems dropped, and one of my main takeaways is I absolutely will be going back through this episode. So if folks are kind of tuning in and you need to go back and like get their journal, whatever, and write your thoughts out, reflect more on it, like please do that. This other main takeaway that I'll add is just something that we've kind of did in the wrap up, which is, folks can walk away with concrete interventions to apply if you are kind of navigating through this topic, kind of in your life. Like, where do you start? What do you do? And, there are so many ways that were identified for folks where you can start, and so, yeah, I find this as a resource. And so, that's the main takeaway. There's some resources here. Did you all, Nadelynn and Lauren, do y'all want to do main takeaways?
Sure, I've got one. Just kind of talking about how everybody has their own style with intuition and how trauma affects them. My main takeaway would be for people who are listening in to not compare yourself, not compare your intuitive style, your journey with another person's. It's just not going to be beneficial for you. Okay, you've got this. We all believe in you. You're very deserving of everything that is coming to you, and I am just so excited for you to begin your intuitive journey in a new path.
I think for me, something that I don't know that we said explicitly, but was kind of just woven throughout, is this idea of slowing down and how radical that is. And I think, in fact, in the world of trauma and in the world of trauma healing and the world of intuition, like slow is fast, right? Like slowing down is actually what gets us the connections that we want.
I gotta rewatch. I just so many gems. I feel so fed spiritually, and I'm just so grateful for each of you here. I love that. I just appreciate the wisdom. Thank you, y'all. Thank you. I'm going off script a little bit, but thank you.
Thank you all. I really love being here.
Oh. Well, I'm
Seriously.
passing it back to Sequoia. We want to honor your time, y'all. So thank you so much. Yeah, so grateful. Okay, mi amiga.
Okay, thank you for being with us today. Let's keep this conversation going. If you are catching this on the replay, please definitely share your thoughts or questions in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We definitely respond back and would love to, just hear from folks how you're feeling about what you took in over the course of this episode. And join us in 2 weeks on November 7th for our live episode 11, Unlearning Burnout for Social Workers. We are going to do a deep dive on how we navigate burnout and the unlearning practices we can utilize as social workers and practitioners.
And again, y'all, thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for those who are tuning in, whether it's live or the playback, for being in community with us, supporting a heart-centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, identity, and ancestral connections through the lens of tarot, divination, mysticism, mental health, and everything in between. We would love to stay connected and build the spirituality and healing community. So please, if you haven't done so, subscribe to our YouTube page at Reclaiming Soul Work Podcast. Once you subscribe, you can set a reminder for notifications when we release an episode, or sign up to our landing page on our website to be notified when we have a new episode and future offerings. And we also have a newsletter, a free newsletter that goes out every first quarter moon, where you can learn a little bit more about our offerings, events, and any special updates from us. Again, thank you, Lauren and Nadelynn. Thank you, Sequoia. Thank you, community, for being here with us. We are so grateful, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.